Hey guys, welcome to the Bill Barnwell Show. I am Bill Barnwell, as I've been mentioning for a couple weeks now. If you are listening to this in your podcast feed, in your ears, wouldn't you like a feast for your eyes as well? I'm not sure if this is a feast necessarily, or if I'm a feast, but maybe I have some guests who are a feast for your eyes. You can check out the show on YouTube twice a week during the NFL season. And today, a feast for the eyes and the ears, all the senses. A delectable addition to the show today. Talking about the league's worst teams. And which of those worst teams has a chance of showing, shall we say, some signs of life, some hope, some optimism by the end of the year. If you're a fan of my wonderful guest, you will know exactly why he is here and which team we are going to talk about first. It is the host, or one of the hosts, of the excellent Heed the Call podcast. It is Dan Hanzus. Dan, how are you?
Hey, Bill. It's a curse. It's a blessing because when Bill Barnwell says, "Okay, I'm going to do a show on the terrible teams," it's so nice that you thought of me. So I'm flattered. But that is my connection point in the football cognoscenti at this point. Is like, oh, he's the fan of the Jets. Like it's a tough beat. But I'm happy to be here and talk about the bad teams of our league.
This is a sickos podcast. I feel like this is a podcast for people who love football. And so I think we should try to find the things to love, the things to be optimistic, hopeful about, or just recognize the things that are infuriating and awful, perhaps, about some of the worst teams in football. Because, of course, it does not take a long time for these things to turn around. I think about the Broncos a couple of years ago, where they gave up 70 points to the Miami Dolphins. Looks like they are hopeless. A year later, they're not great, but by the end of that second season, they are in the postseason. Their defense has gone from being an embarrassment to the best in football. Things can change quickly in the NFL. And Dan, I actually want to start there. I'm going to start with the New York Jets, and I'm going to start with a stat that can signify how quickly things can turn for NFL teams, especially when they make major moves, like firing their head coach. Robert Saleh was fired by the New York Jets last season after 5 games. We are now sitting here after 5 games in the 2025 season. They've gone through Jeff Ulbrich and Aaron Glenn as their head coach. The stat I have for you, Dan. In the last 17 games the Jets play with Robert Saleh, they allowed 1.47 points per drive and a negative 0.11 EPA per defensive snap. Those were both the best of any defense in football. You can probably see where this is going. Over their next 17 games without Robert Saleh as their head coach and defensive architect, 2.66 points allowed per drive, 0.12 EPA for a defensive snap. Then those are both the worst in football. They have gone from being the best defense in football over their last full season with Robert Saleh to the worst defense in football over the last season without Robert Saleh. And I think Robert Saleh is a good defensive coach. I don't think he is single-handedly transforming a defense from the best to the worst in football. And so when I start with the Jets and start with the idea of, okay, well, why should they have been more competitive? Why should people have been more optimistic? And why maybe would you hope they're going to improve in the months to come? The question that I keep coming back to is, what's happened to this defense that was so overwhelming during the majority of the Saleh era? And what's happening to prevent it from getting at least vaguely back on track so far with Aaron Glenn?
Yeah, it's terrible. And I love those stats. The baseline service stat, it went from 19.7 in Saleh's final 17 games, points per game, to now 28. I've been taken to calling our defensive coordinator now Steve Wilkes-Booth, because he's killing the Jets every week. You know what? It's, first of all, a lesson that we always learn. Bad owners lord over bad teams, and it all starts when they fire. And I wasn't a Saleh guy. I wasn't a big fan of Robert Saleh. I thought maybe he was where he is now as a DC with the 49ers, I think is his best spot to be. But they had an identity. And when you fire a head coach when the team was 2-3 and just, getting off the plane from London, it was such a devastating decision by Woody, because then you elevated Ulbrich, who's a good defensive coordinator and a good defensive mind himself, but you put him in an uncomfortable situation. You didn't let him do what he was doing, which is lord over the defense. And then I think that led to the defense falling apart, where Ulbrich now was delegating and he didn't have the same presence. And I don't think they've ever gotten their mojo back since that decision. So the defense spiraled. And this year, man, it's hard to make sense. It's the stat that everyone is talking about now about the Jets is that they set the record for most games in a row without forcing a turnover, which is just astounding to have 0 turnovers in 5 games. So I think, I'm curious, you, Bill, because certified ball knower, like where you come down on that, like how much of that do you think is bad luck and how much is just faulty game planning, or is it go down to the pass rush, or just you have the wrong players, and is it a scheme? Like, because that boggles my mind, and I think it's so much of their problem is that they can't ever kind of create any changes in momentum, in short fields for the offense, and the defense feeling good about itself and starting to feed off the crowd. Like all that stuff is absent because you can't force a turnover. So I'm curious, like what your thoughts are on that very odd stat around this team.
Yeah, it's very strange. You go back to, I think a good example of that sort of energy you get from the crowd is the Rodgers Achilles game, right? Where Rodgers gets hurt and that crowd was going nuts that entire game because the Jets defense was playing out of its mind. You had the crazy Garrett Wilson catch for a touchdown. Even though that was realistically the end of their season, Jets fans were going crazy during that game because the defense was playing so well. And I really think it's a combination of things, right? The point you bring up about Ulbrich getting promoted is really true. And I agree with you. I think there's like this distinction I have to make. Like, I don't think Robert Saleh was a great head coach necessarily, but I do think it created problems without really solving any of the problems the Jets had at that time. Like it broke the defense without fixing any of the offensive concerns. And I do think there's like sort of an identity question about what the Jets want to be versus what they actually are on paper. And so I do look at Aaron Glenn now because the Ulbrich era is over. Like he's gone. For whatever problems they had, that's in the past. They hire Aaron Glenn this offseason. What we know about Aaron Glenn is, okay, Aaron Glenn's going to play a lot of man coverage. He wants to blitz. He's not going to blitz as much as he did during the tail days in Detroit because he has more pieces up front to work with. But their identity was going to be, we're going to play more man. We have a great number one corner to do that with in Sauce Gardner. We're going to spend a lot of money on Brandon Stevens, which didn't really, line up with, I think, expectations for a lot of people who do pay close attention to cornerbacks and cornerback coverage. And I just think you have this defense that wants to be something it's not. Like they want to be this man-heavy, sort of get in your face and scare you kind of defense, but they're tame. Like they don't have the guys to pull that off, and so teams aren't afraid. There's no sense of fear of, okay, like we're going to go into New Jersey and have to, scrap for yards against the Jets. No, teams are very comfortable hitting big plays against the Jets because they don't have the guys who can do that. And I don't want to blame Sauce Gardner. I don't think he's like the biggest problem with this, but there's this expectation that you have this sort of like Pat Surtain level building block on defense that you can work everything off of. And I think he's a good player, but I just don't know if he's been that guy since really, sort of year 2 of his tenure.
Yeah, and you look at Sauce, and I feel the same way, like, 'cause I know he's an easy guy to pick on and say, what happened to this dude? He was actually playing pretty well against Dallas before the Pickens play, but it's telling because after the game, they asked Sauce, like, so what happened on that touchdown? He goes, busted coverage. Indicating that maybe there's supposed to be a safety helping him out, and maybe so. According to, the only person to feel more sorry for within our sphere is your colleague, Rich Cimini, who's in a hell he cannot escape from for like 40 years and counting. But yeah, like, he pointed out that there's inside the building, there's, so rumblings about the scheme and whether guys are understanding it, and there's been a lot of coverage busts. As anybody that's watched the Jets, they've been mystified by play action and rollouts and like some of that. Like, how much do you put on Wilks here, and what does Aaron Glenn have to do? And I think one thing that Glenn, as a Jets fan, I'm a little frustrated by, because I'm not like fire everybody, because that's what Woody Johnson did, and that's the wrong idea. But Glenn's like, his mindset with Wilks, and maybe even the scheme that Wilks is running that's not working right now, is like, well, I was in Detroit a couple of years ago, and I sucked my first year, and my head coach believed in me, and everything was okay in the end. It's like, okay, that it's good to have experience to draw from, but don't just assume this is a apples to apples comparison. I hope they're really studying this, and I'm sure they are. I'm sure this is a nightmare for Glenn to be the first 0-5 Jets coach to begin his career. But they have to make changes, and if that means simplifying and figure things out. And the only other thing I'll say is the Jermaine Johnson absence, I think, has really hurt their defensive front. I think with Quinn in there and Will McDonald, the guy on the rise, and if you had a healthy Jermaine Johnson, like, you kind of have something to build off there. And with Johnson disappearing, I feel like and I'm not sure how much more he's down, and losing, middle linebacker depth. Also, like, there have been some losses that they don't have the depth to sustain. So it's made it even more difficult for Wilks to audible and figure out how to fix this thing.
Yeah, I mean, losing C.J. Mosley last year for most of the season, didn't help. Now Quincy Williams, another excellent middle linebacker, is out for a stretch here. I think I keep coming back to that play I tweeted out against the Dolphins, where Tua boots out to the left on play action, and you have two guys running a route. You have Tyreek Hill, before he got hurt, obviously, and you have Julian Hill. And the Jets end up doubling Julian Hill perfectly. He is locked down.
Brilliant.
And Tyreek Hill is running wide open with nobody covering him. And it's like, whatever, like, you can blow a coverage here and there, but like, that's like a core naked concept the Dolphins run that everybody in the league runs. It's not like you're seeing something exotic that you've never seen before on tape, and you're not even getting to the right guy. Like, it's one thing, okay, if you're, getting beat, like, just, hey, Tyreek Hill is a fast player, like, you're going to have him run past you. That happens. Like, I'm not going to criticize someone for that. But if you can't even get anybody near the Dolphins' top receiver at that time, if you're doubling by accident, clearly, a backup tight end, like, what do you do? Like that I think is the disconcerting part to me, is even if they line up well, I have questions about whether they're a good fit for this defense. They are playing man at the 7th highest rate in football, and they are allowing a 126.9 passer rating, which is the second worst mark of any defense in football when they play man coverage. I don't know if they have the horses to play man, and sometimes the horses are going for a gallop away from the play, and I don't totally understand what's happening. And so I do think you have this sort of like dual conundrum of, we don't even know if the scheme's a right fit. We don't even know if they can play the scheme well, if they're being taught the scheme well. And then I think you have a head coach in Aaron Glenn who's saying, okay, well, whatever, like, we sucked at the beginning of my time in Detroit, and they did for a couple of years, but they have a lot more pieces in place than the first year of that Lions team did. They have a lot of guys who they're expecting to be really good football players. I'm a little surprised they're not playing Will McDonald more. He's playing 15% of the snaps, and I sort of figured maybe, with Johnson out, you don't want to play him too much because he's not the biggest guy in the world, but just thinking, okay, let's just get our best players on the field and see if that makes a difference for us. It is disheartening because it feels like the offense is such a work in progress in some ways, and the expectations are so low for the offense that the only way this team is going to take a step forward is on the defensive side of the football. And you hired a coach who hopefully you thought would kind of fix things quickly on defense and get them going on defense. And it feels like, if anything, the defense has gotten worse from where it was a year ago.
It's a weird 0-5 too, right? Because it's not like in 2020, it started 0-5 and then 0-13 and then still didn't get the first pick. That team just sucked. This team has had 2 stomach punch losses. They're averaging 144 yards per game on the ground.
Really
Justin Fields has been not great and maybe not even good, but he has not thrown an interception, and he's given them some things on their offense, even if I don't see him as a long-term answer. To be winless, it's a level of frustration for Jets fans that, it's tough to swallow, because the whole idea is we knew this wasn't a Super Bowl team or probably even a playoff team, but to be where it is now, you just feel like we're just stuck in the mud and there's no way to get out right now. And it's a tough place to be as a fan and as a team.
Yeah, this is a team that should be able to play from ahead. They have good pass rushers. They have a really good running game that, to me, is not about to dissipate or disappear. Like, I think it's a legitimate, it hasn't been the most consistent in the whole world. They struggled against the Bills, which was a little disappointing, but great against the Steelers in week 1, great last week against the Cowboys, who admittedly are terrible on defense as well. But like, they can run the football, and they're getting more explosives from Breece Hall. Justin Fields has made an impact. He had an incredible scramble for a touchdown a couple weeks ago. I do believe in the run game. And I think if they do get ahead, they can pull this off. But you go back to the Steelers game in week 1, they were ahead for the vast majority of that game. Steelers could not get out of their own way on defense, and yet they somehow still blew that game. And that's the discouraging part, is like, if they haven't done it yet, I mean, when are they going to be getting these leads to pull this off? That's the part that I find so disconcerting. And so when I think about, okay, well, what are the reasons to think this team could improve, get better? They're going to win some games here and there. There's going to be some variance that goes their way. They're going to start forcing turnovers. They're not going to go all season without forcing a takeaway. But outside of the turnovers, is there something you think is likely to improve or get better or kind of settle in that you think would lead this team to have something to build upon as we approach the second half of the year?
I guess the defense can't get worse, right? Maybe they do get some bodies back. Quincy Williams comes back, Jermaine Johnson comes back, and Glenn, we're not that far removed from him being praised as a genius for making, with that beat-up Detroit team, winning the division against Minnesota in Week 18, and maybe him and Wilkes put something together, and they just stabilize the defense, so it's not just horses running free through the secondary at all times. And here's the sicko in me here, Bill.
Ooh, okay.
They're in London against the Broncos, so maybe Bo Nix has some bad Indian food out there. And maybe you steal one, and you just do, and you steal a win there. Then they got home Panthers, at Cincinnati, home Browns. I don't know. Any chance they can win 3 out of 4 and have a pulse? And because one like broad point, Bill, it's kind of a good year to suck. Like at this stage, 0-5 is no one's done it. So the Jets are kind of a different category, but the AFC especially is so wide open right now that if you can just steady yourself, maybe you could hang around and play some relevant football after Thanksgiving, which is, for the teams we're talking about today, is all you can really hope for at this point, right?
Yeah, I mean, these 1-4 teams, very unlikely they will make it back to the postseason. I don't have the numbers in front of me, and they're also kind of skewed because you have to account for the 7th seed in each conference, but it's not ideal. You don't want to be in a 1-4 spot if you're hoping to make a postseason run. Speaking of these 1-4 teams, is there any of them that stand out to you as like maybe a team where you've seen something, they flash a little bit, little glimmer in their eye, in your eye, where it feels like, hey, maybe they have a shot at kind of being competitive and standing out in the second half of the year?
I got 2. Should I go AFC or NFC?
Let's go NFC.
All right, let's talk about the other team in the Meadowlands. What a stomach punch with the Malik Neighbors injury, right? It was actually kind of jet-like, to be honest with you, because that building on fire, Jackson Dart, you're upsetting this team, and it just feels like everything is new, and then he goes up for that ball. That's the only thing that's stopping me from really getting on the Giants bandwagon as a team that can figure some things out, because you got, that fumble by Scadaboo was a brutal one, obviously, and a 14-point swing that kind of ended that game. But he's obviously got some juice, and every Uncle George in the tri-state area is pumped up about how he plays the game the right way, and that's cool too. But Jackson Dart, obviously, he's revitalized the fan base at the very least, and is bringing an energy that did not exist with Russ. And when I look at these bad teams, it's like, all right, do they have a defined strength, something to draw off? And as we know with the Giants, it's that front four. So if they, I think there's wins to be had and momentum to be gained, but I'm not going to lie, the loss at the Saints was a real step back. You got to find a way to win that game up 14-3. And their secondary, not as bad as the Jets secondary maybe, but that's been a major problem as well, or at least it was on Sunday.
Yeah, up 14-3 at a Saints team that not tanking, but maybe they are tanking and they don't realize it, but not playing the best football I've ever seen. We might talk about them later on in the show, but you turn the ball over 5 times, and that's the tough part. And you see the impact of in a row. I didn't even realize it was in a row. That makes it even worse. You see the impact of the injuries, right? I think back to one of the interceptions in that game where they have Bo Collins playing wide receiver, and he gets jammed at the line and just stops. It was like he got freeze tagged. Freeze. Yeah, what's the past tense of freeze tag? Freeze toed. Froze tag.
He got froze toed. Let's just roll with it.
He got froze-toked and just shut down. And Jackson Dart expected this receiver to keep running. And if it were Malik Neighbors, if it were Darius Slayton, I feel confident they would have kept running. But because he's a UFA, he stopped, and it was an interception. And the Giants do not have the margin of error to deal with 3 turnovers in a game, let alone 5. It is just not something they can consistently deal with on offense. And I do think there's stuff to like about Jackson Dart. The sheer and utter disregard for his body does not seem to bode well for his
troublesome,
future.
yeah.
A little worrying. And it's weird because, like, you know, he is mobile for sure, but it's not like he was in college and he was running, you know, 10 design runs a game. Like, he was a scrambler. He had some running here and there, but, like, he's running more as a pro quarterback than a college quarterback. And so I think there's an element of him getting used to that sort of role in an offense that is a little concerning to me. But
like that run, Bill, in his first game against the Chargers, when he threw out the stiff arm, like, you do that a couple more times, you're gonna get your arm snapped in half. Like, you just can't do stuff like that at this level. Yeah,
and that's the part that concerns me, is just when the Giants had to go back very briefly in that game to Russell Wilson, it was just like, oh no. We don't want to do this again. They're 28th in offensive success rate. Cam Scotabo is averaging 3.8 yards per carry. There's an energy for sure. And there's, you know, some big plays. I kind of like what they did, you know, in terms of expanding the RPO game. But the thing that I keep coming back to with the Giants offense, the thing that I need to see change before I can believe, is this. I read about them as one of the most likely teams to improve this year. And one of the biggest reasons why was their red zone offense in 2024. 43% of their drives turned into touchdowns, the worst in football. And you look at history, the vast majority of teams, pretty much everyone, that bad at scoring touchdowns in the red zone takes a big step forward the following year.
What's the average for that, by the way, in
That's
general?
a good question. I would say in the 60s, if I remember correctly. The Giants are at 31.6% this year. They're not just worse. They're significantly worse at scoring touchdowns in the red zone. And it's only been 5 games. There's time to improve. Yeah. Certainly, you would think having a more mobile quarterback would help, and they have scored touchdowns with the quarterback run game in the red zone. But at this point, I'm just wondering, like, is there just not the right play calls, the right concepts doing here? Losing Neighbors is going to hurt because he's your best sort of man coverage beater in close quarters. There's lots of, like, just boot concepts that just go nowhere, like half boots where you just get stuck and throw the ball away or take a sack or throw it to the back of, the back of the end zone. There's not a good reliable run game with Scotabo so far to lean on in those spots. And so I'm Mr. Regression towards the mean. I'm Mr. This stuff will bounce back. This will even out. I'm getting concerned. It's not going to even out. And this team, if they're 31st, 32nd in the red zone, that is not a formula they can stick with, because their 2 best big play receivers in Neighbors and Slayton are both hurt.
Yeah. And they're on a short week, and they're
on a short week.
The Eagles.
The Philadelphia
They kind of got to win for this to even be an interesting conversation. I feel like because the schedule is so brutal, you need another, after the letdown at the Superdome, you need to have another electric situation where they win the game against the rival Eagles, because then they got at Denver, at Eagles, at home Eagles. Niners, at Bears, home Packers. I take everything, but this is too. They had to get off to a faster start than they did, I think, and this is a tough spot for them right now.
Yeah, they play the fifth toughest schedule so far, I should say. And they play the second toughest schedule from here on out. It is a brutal slate. I think there was this idea of, sort of when they were having the Jackson Dart conversations of, they have a really tough start, but then kind of things sort of slow down. No, their schedule sucks all season. It is tough the entire year. That, I think, is the toughest part. And then the other thing that concerns me, you mentioned the defensive line, and that's a totally reasonable logic there. Okay, well, you can build on that. That is the thing you can rely upon. They are 31st in EPA per play against the run this year. They're 15th in pressure rate and sack rate when they don't blitz, when they rush 4 or less. That's not a defensive line that's carrying your team. And that's the part that concerns me, is they're hopeless to me if they don't have that defensive line. There's been some great individual moments. Dexter Lawrence had an awesome interception. Abdul Carter had a really great game against the Chargers. They're going to be fine. I think this is a totally solid defensive line, but they have to be one of the 3 or 4 best defensive lines in football for the Giants to have a hope on defense. And right now, they're just not playing at that level.
So I kind of wasted our time bringing up the Giants.
No,
it sounds like you got them ticketed for about 5-12, 4-13.
Yeah, because I went into this exercise thinking I would pick the Giants as the team that was going to do. And then when I did the numbers, I was like, I don't know if I actually feel
Let's try again.
that is borne out. Let's try again. What was your AFC team?
The Browns. Now,
really? Okay,
yeah,
tell me on this one.
Yeah, this one is also. Listen, what are we looking at? We're looking at a bunch of teams that might all be bad, but this is a team that obviously they have a defined strength with their defense and their ability to make game-changing plays. They have one of the best players in the world in Myles Garrett. You have a rookie class that has excelled. They're playing a ton of snaps and making plays. So if you can keep games low scoring and you could have a running game potential. I know their offensive line was a major issue with Flacco not working out in Cleveland, but Judkins has given them something in the running game. So if you could just play a bunch of ugly games, you have a really good home field advantage, as we all know, and you could just kind of hang around in AFC North. That's milquetoast to me at best. This all hinges on getting something approximating league average play from either Dylan Gabriel or I guess now Shedeur Sanders. So it's grasping at straws, but I don't know. I've liked the fight out of the Browns, and I've liked, like I said, their draft class is promising, and I like the head coach a lot. I feel like there are things to like about the Browns if you want to talk yourselves into them, finding them, a young team finding itself and building momentum as the season goes along. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we finally found a team that's good at something when we left the greater New York area. Browns defense is great. I mean, I don't have any issues talking about the Browns defense. And you mentioned the rookie class, and it has been really impressive. Mason Graham's looked good up front, had a really great game against the Packers. Carson Schlesinger was my defensive rookie of the year after 4 weeks. He's making plays all over the place. He looks like he's, just a 10-year pro. Looks like he would have played for the Bill Belichick era Browns. Like, he just fits in and is mobile and goes around. And even beyond the rookies on defense, some of the guys they have who I knew were okay, who look like they're suddenly Pro Bowlers. Malik Collins has been awesome on the interior of that line. Isaiah McGuire looks like he's suddenly, like the Alex Highsmith to Myles Garrett's TJ Watt. Like, he looks like he is now legitimately a guy you need to worry about on an every snap basis. And obviously teams are shifting their protection towards Myles Garrett. They're chipping Myles Garrett. They're doubling Myles Garrett. Nothing wrong with that. But the Browns haven't always had a guy who can win one-on-one across from Garrett. Now they have two, and Mason Graham might be the third. So it is really hard to block these guys. And there's, a half dozen snaps a game where Myles Garrett seems to teleport and just blows up your play. There's something you can do. This is a legitimate, really good defense. And we saw in the Packers game, even when you get basically nothing from your offense, if they can give you a short field, they can force a turnover. If they can, come up with a blocked field goal or some kind of big play with special teams, like, that could be enough to win the game against a really good football team. So that, to me, is totally, totally believable. And then you mentioned Quinshon Judkins, and I'm doing an article this week on the rookie running back class, and he looks really good. I mean, there's a lot of explosiveness there. Not the sort of like down-to-down efficiency of like a Nick Chubb when he was doing really well in this Browns offense, but he's getting a lot of stuff to the outside. He's bouncing things. He's outrunning defenders. Like, he looks like he is can be the best athlete on the field when he has the ball in his hands, which they have not had since Nick Chubb got hurt. The guys they've put in, the Jerome Fords of the world, just not that caliber of athlete. And Judkins can be that player. Then there's the quarterback. And you said league average with Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. Do you think that's plausible? Do you think they can get to that point?
Based on what I saw from Gabriel in one game, I'm not obviously there. So we just need to see more. I think the first thing they did right was get Flacco out of the equation. You're a developing team here. If Flacco was the right guy for this offense, it would have made sense. Like, oh, wait, we can win games with the rest of this core, especially on the defensive side of the ball. But Flacco wasn't a fit here, so I thought they made the right move to pivot, and now you get him out of the building. And now he's starting for the Bengals, which is just crazy. But maybe it will work for them.
What a world.
I don't know. Like, all I know is that Gabriel, he doesn't strike me as an imposing figure, an undersized left-handed quarterback, and I'm not a Shedeur Sanders guy based on just what I've seen from him so far. And I don't know, not to be cranky WFAN caller, but the miming of that annoyed me. I was like, God, is this guy, are we supposed to take you serious as a professional? But we're going to see both of them. And it's a grand experiment, and maybe you hit on one. Maybe you get a lottery ticket in your hand here. And again, not a lottery ticket like we found Tom Brady, but just somebody that doesn't kill you week to week, and then you win a bunch of 17, 14 games maybe. Maybe? I don't know. Things are troubling when I think today was the first time Kevin Stefanski got is there a chance Deshaun Watson pays this year question during his press conference, which people need to go back and watch what the Browns offense was last year. It's over. That's a WFAN caller. What about Deshaun? Is Deshaun going to play? League average is tough. Dylan Gabriel did throw three touchdowns last week. They didn't throw an interception against a very good Vikings pass rush, a very good Vikings defense that gives even veteran quarterbacks lots of fits at times. I do think this was a very sort of low-risk offense, if that's fair to say. Like, It was about getting the ball out quick, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, that's a viable strategy. League average might be tough. If you can be 24th in the NFL, I think that's fine. But really, in the big picture, this team is competing for 2026 and 2027 when they have more draft picks, when they have more guys to fill in. If this draft was good, but what if we get another draft like that? And we stack a second draft of young players who are talented and impactful. And then what if we do get that quarterback, which, I think in the big picture, I don't think either of us think Dylan Gabriel is going to be a 10-year starter. We don't think Shedeur Sanders is going to be a 10-year starter. If they are in position to next year be in a spot where they can be compelling with a quarterback, I think that's the sort of realistic goal for them. It's not, can we win 8 games and maybe win a totally disastrous AFC North, but can we win 6 games and look like we're on the right track heading into 2026? Yeah, I think that's, and I wish they had some primetime games. I love a good Browns primetime game in November and December. They don't I don't believe have any of those. But
you don't think they'll get flexed?
Are they on the schedule? I hope maybe they are.
No, they are not.
They are not. Yeah.
9:30 a.m. was their primetime game. Again, they could theoretically get flexed late in the year. I think that's very unlikely.
Yeah, I think they should always have at least one Thursday night game where just people are going nuts in that building and they win a game they have no business winning. They'll have to do that a couple times to be in the mix here, obviously.
Yes. I do think their schedule clears up a little bit here in the second half of the season. Have played the Packers, the Lions, and the Vikings, and the Ravens, who at least were supposed to be good at that point of the year.
It's a very Browns setup where they got the Ravens before it all totally fell apart, and then they're on the schedule when they might have it back together, and they go on their inevitable run. Like, that feels like a very Browns setup.
Not ideal. But they do get the Dolphins, do get the Jets, do get the Raiders, who we're probably going to talk about, Tennessee, the Bears, down the stretch. So they do get the Bengals in Week 18 when they're going to be the only team that plays Joe Burrow twice this year, which is also another example of just, the Browns always find a way, unfortunately. But I do think this defense is legit, and that, I think, is the building block for them. Is just, we have a top 5 defense. If we can just be okay on offense, we've made the playoffs with that formula before. And you can run the football and you can play defense. You get ahead in the game. It's been hard to do, but if you can get ahead, by a score, by 2 scores, they're going to be hard to come back on. So I do think there's some optimism.
I think I'm just trying to will this into reality for my close friend and business partner, Mark Sessler. I think
that's fair.
If I'm not going to be happy, maybe he will be.
That's fair. One of you deserves to be happy.
Yeah.
Tennessee, also not good for the Gravedigger. That's not ideal.
It's a tough one. Tough one over at the Heed the Call headquarters right now in terms of competitive football.
You guys could maybe import like a Lions fan to help out on the show, just bring someone in.
Even the Titans finally win, and the only thing people want to talk about is how the Cardinals blew it,
Oh, man. They weren't even on my list. I wasn't even I'm not going to entertain this notion seriously.
No.
I even said to Dominique Foxworth on his show Sunday night, if you're Brian Callahan, how could you go into that locker room and be like, hey, we got something to build on here, guys. All we need is 2 of the worst plays we've ever seen on an NFL field, and we could narrowly pull out a victory.
I'm sure. I'm sure he'll do everything he can. But, yeah, I think that was one of those games where you just got to, thank the football gods and move forward. That was insane.
Yeah. And hey, Tennessee, Jeffrey Simmons is playing out of his mind. I've liked what I've seen from Cam Ward so far. I know he hasn't been perfect. There's been a lot of sloppy plays. I don't think he's getting a ton of help. The offensive line has been a mess. But like, they stink. It's okay. They don't have to be good right now. I think there's this like sort of CJ Stroud, Jaden Daniels fueled thing of like, you get a young quarterback, and if you stink, you can suddenly be an 11-win, 12-win team. That is the incredibly rare exception. That is not the rule. And so it's okay. The Tennessee can be bad. If they can win 4 games this year and look like they have a semblance of a run game and the offensive line looks like it's fine, that would be fine for them in 2025.
And that's all I ever asked from, and I'll continue to ask from the Jets. Just show me you're building something, and then stack another good draft class and some free agent moves. Like, Tennessee falls in that category for sure.
Yes. Another team in the AFC I wanted to talk about, where I was optimistic about them before the year. I don't think I was the only one. And let's just say the bandwagon is rapidly shedding people every single week, is the Las Vegas Raiders. Start with a win over the Patriots. Looks like it might be pretty impressive in the long run, given that the Patriots look like they're a very good football team. And then you lose to the Chargers. You get blown out by the Commanders with Marcus Mariota. You lose in a heartbreaker to the Chicago Bears, and then blown to smithereens by the Colts this week. Sort of feels like a must-have-it game, weirdly, against Tennessee this week, where you go 1-5, you're getting the Chiefs in Kansas City the following week, you're going to be 1-6, hitting your bye. I mean, I don't think Pete Carroll's getting fired, but there's been talk about Geno Smith getting benched. There's been talk about, major changes to this team. It just feels like all of the optimism and excitement about, okay, they got dudes who are going to just fit in and be solid pros at the most important spots in football with Pete Carroll and Geno Smith. That's what I said all offseason. And it feels like that is totally dissipated after the first 5 games of the year.
Yeah, I mean, the offensive line has really killed them, obviously, because, I know he broke out last week, Ashton Genty, but before that, just watching those games, like, how many times did he get the ball and he is swallowed up immediately? And then
even in that game, he got, there's a fourth and one where he gets hit by the nose tackle, runs totally free, and the middle linebacker who's directly behind the nose tackle. The two guys with the quickest path to the running back both get in the backfield before Ashton Genty can do anything, and he is not only stopped but also fumbles. That's in his best game of the year. That's in the game where he did break out.
And that, now left, Colton Miller's out, and the other big part of it, I think, because Geno, I'm not going to pile on Geno because he's having a tough go of it. He's with a new team, and he's had the injuries, and it's not a talent-rich operation. But losing Brock Bowers, I know he finally is out of the lineup this past week, but he hasn't been Brock Bowers since the beginning of the season because of this injury. I think they made the decision, smart decision, just like, we don't want to have 40% of this guy all year. We want to, it's kind of what happened with Max Crosby last year, right? Where it's like, get this guy right if you can and bring him back, because I think that will help so much for him to have somebody that he could really just trust that's going to get open and make plays. So Geno has always been a guy that's going to throw the ball up for grabs every once in a while. But this year, like, they can't sustain it. They don't have enough strength in other areas of the operation to deal with like the New York Jets version of Geno Smith, if you will. So it's very difficult situation there. And I wonder, like, you're right. Like, if they don't win this game, Geno could be playing for his job, right? Like, because if they do get stopped and go into the bye, Pete Carroll is going to be a guy. And we talked about it on our show. We had James Palmer on, and we do our Hot Butts episode where we talk about the head coaches who could be in the most danger. And Pete Carroll is obviously kind of a legend, but he's also an older coach. And with his contract structure, like, if they decide that this is not maybe the fit and it's not in lockstep with kind of the greater viewpoint of the organization after 1 year, could they pivot out of Carroll quickly? Maybe. I think there's some dynamics and some pressures that are on top of your typical slow start from a team that's not a Super Bowl contender to start with. Yeah,
and certainly Mark Davis does not operate by anyone else's rules besides Mark Davis's rules, and for better or worse, that is the case. You would figure Geno would be first. Like, if they're going to make a dramatic move, it would be Geno before Pete.
Sure.
And based on how Geno has played. And that, I think, is not... I mean, the point about Brock Bowers being out is totally true. And the point about Geno being someone who's comfortable throwing the ball into tight spaces is true. That can be a strength and a weakness. He's an incredibly accurate passer, trusts his arm, trusts his read, and has every right to do so at this point of his career. He's been really good on Seattle. you also look at his numbers in Seattle, and he declined each year. He was worse. I think he was like 21st in QBR last year, and now this year he looks like maybe the 25th, 26th best starting quarterback in football. Like he's not. It's not as if the pace he was on as a 35-year-old quarterback was, not crazy to think he might just be this guy at this point of his career. Some of the interceptions have been bad luck here and there. Like you're not going to throw 9 picks in 5 games just on sheer talent. Like you're going to have some stuff pop up here and there. But I really think, even beyond the Brock Bowers injury, I'm really disappointed with how this Chip Kelly offense looks, because what I was hoping for was an offense where, okay, we invested heavily in the running back. I have some skepticism that was a good idea on a draft with so many good backs, but okay, you did it. You have an offensive coach in Chip Kelly who clearly understands and appreciates offensive architecture, built an offense at Ohio State that worked really well. They're going to have a good run game in my head. I figure, okay, like nothing wrong with having a good run game. Like the Eagles did it and won a Super Bowl with it. So that's going to make Geno's life easier. They can go into 12 personnel, get bigger, use their athletes, use Bowers, use Michael Mayer, both of whom now, by the way, are injured, and be fine with that. Okay, that's an okay offensive philosophy. We'll see how that goes. Watching Ashton Genty's carries this year, you mentioned the sort of moments where there's just guys in the backfield flooding in. And sometimes it's just bad offensive line play. Sometimes it's sloppy offensive line play. Their line is bad. But the angles at which they're being asked to make blocks is really bad. And there are so many times this year where I've watched them and seen like Jacoby Myers in the slot needing to like get all the way across a defender who's like in the B gap or, in the C gap, trying to take them out of a play. And it's just like, he can't make that block. He's not Puka Nacua. And it's not Ohio State where you have these sort of like super freaks at wide receiver who are going to be NFL Hall of Famers, where you're playing, NFL or playing college defenses that have 4 NFL players in them at best. And, your better athletes are going to be able to make those blocks and get that leverage. There are so many plays in the run game here where linemen and especially receivers are being asked to make blocks with terrible leverage. They're not being in situations where they can succeed, and you just can't make that work. They just do not have the pieces to do that. They're not the Rams. The Rams can pull that off. Ohio State can pull that off. The Raiders cannot, and I want to see how that changes, because they could theoretically come after the year and say, listen, we tried with Chip Kelly. It's just not a good fit for us. Not crazy to think he'll have head coaching interest in college football. Not crazy to think he'll have offensive coordinator interest in college football if he wants to go back there and be an OC for one of the strongest teams in college football. But I just don't see an offense that plays to its strengths. We saw even early in the year, week 1, there was that controversy about how Brock Bowers wasn't playing a ton when they had one tight end on the field. There was the thing with Ashton Genty where they wanted to change his stance before the snap, and eventually they've seemed to gone back to him being, the telephone pole stance, which is fine if it works. I just think there is a disconnect between sort of what the Raiders could be and what they actually are on offense on a week-to-week basis. And I don't know how much of that is the offensive line being bad. I don't know how much of it is Chip or Pete, but it just feels like they're making it so much harder for themselves, and they're not giving their players the sort of easy buttons or the answers they need to get this working, especially early in the season as they're trying to figure all this out.
When's the last time a Chip Kelly offense has been successful in the NFL?
First year, for second half of the first year with the Eagles. I mean,
Nick
it's
Foles
not ideal
as starter.
Trying to write about that season at the time and trying to be like, Nick Foles is not actually the greatest quarterback in NFL history, guys. I promise you. Oh, it was such a burden. And then Mark Sanchez, of all people, played in that offense the second half of the second season with Chip.
Yeah, Mark.
You're right though. Like, it has been a long time. I think the hope was, okay, he went to college, was at UCLA, went to Ohio State. Like, he modernized the offense. He's going to have more answers than he had in Philadelphia and San Francisco, where it just became sort of like turn tempo up, turn tempo down. That was the only sort of lever he pulled. It doesn't feel like that's the case, unfortunately. It doesn't feel like he's a much better coordinator than the guy he was when
and
he
then
left
sometimes he's got
football.
Literally Tom Brady in his own booth. And it's like, that's probably leading to some heat behind the scenes as well.
That's fair. The other part, I think, is, you hope the defense would take a step forward with Pete Carroll, who's one of the best defensive back coaches in NFL history. Certainly has built some good defenses in Seattle, but you go back to the same discussion with Chip Kelly. When was the last time Pete Carroll had an above average defense? And it was not anytime recently. I think it would probably like 2018 or so. Like it wasn't during the tail end of the Russ era, and it wasn't during the Geno Smith era. And so they're okay. They're like 16th against the pass, but we saw the Colts did whatever they wanted against them on defense in this game. And it feels like if you can block Max Crosby, you're not going to have trouble beating the other guys 10 on 10 or 9 on 10.
I'm looking at this, Bill. So if there's Raiders, Ravens, Dolphins, Browns, Titans, Saints, Giants, Jets, 1 or 0 win teams, it's probably the Ravens, right? Still, mostly if you had to pick one to make the playoffs, like if they could figure things out and then have a Week 18. They've already beat the Steelers once, and now if they win Week 18 in Pittsburgh, they finish 9-8 and win the tiebreaker and win that division. Is there anybody else that you would see as more likely than the Baltimore Ravens to end up in the playoffs out of that group?
I'm gonna.
Or are you counting out the Ravens already? You done on the Ravens?
No, I'm going to show you my laptop here that I have my show notes on. I made it really big so you can see what I actually wrote.
I guess it's the Ravens second time.
I guess it's the Ravens. I
Yeah,
literally
that's
had
kind of
the
my
same exact
hypothesis as
experience
well.
you did. That's what I literally had in my notes for the show. I think I had the Saints to talk about as an option. We don't need to get to them. They're weird, they're fun, but they're not good. But I guess it's the Ravens, where you just sort of figure, okay, like they're getting Lamar back and they're going to play an easier schedule. It was second. I don't know if you could see in the size 64 font I had, but second toughest schedule so far, 25th toughest from here on out. The defense is horrible. It is unrecognizable. There are players who, Dan, I don't know about you. I've covered the NFL for a long time. They had like 4 players regularly on defense last week I had never heard of before.
The Texans scored 8 for 8 on drives before Stroud left the game. The Texans
who were abysmal the first couple weeks of the year on offense. They single-handedly restored faith in the CJ Stroud era in Houston. They'll get some guys back. They're not getting Madubuike back, which is awful. He's a really important and valuable player for them. I'm like weirdly optimistic about this Alohi Gilman trade. Their safeties have been terrible. Malachi Starks, their first round pick, has really struggled. I wonder if they're going to give him a little bit of a stretch on the bench to let him kind of, work things back into place. Alohi Gilman, I think, is a solid player. He's going to help them against the run. Odafe Owe, I sort of look at it both ways. Like, he's a talented pass rusher, guy they took in the first round. They need pass rushers. But it sort of felt like they were souring on him. It didn't feel like they even trusted him to be an every down player. And so sort of feels like maybe they just want guys they can trust as opposed to top-end talent at this point. But they're going to get Kyle Hamilton back. They're going to get, or they have, I believe, Kyle Van Noy back, or they're going to get him back on a more regular basis. They're going to get Roquan Smith back. They're not going to be great, but they can be a league average defense. And if you have a league average defense and Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry,
there's the path.
That's going to be fine. That's going to be fine for them. And you mentioned the AFC North, and truly, like, this is going to be a terrible, terrible division. The Steelers have not been good this year. I know what their record is.
Right.
They should have lost to the Jets. They should have lost probably
to
Pats. The Pats. I mean, they are, even by Steelers standards, and I picked the Steelers to make the playoffs this year, and so I finally feel good that I don't have to be on the other side of this stinkfest. Like, seeing this all go in my favor has been great and fun, but this is not a good football team. They might win 9 games, but I predict right now, Dan, here on the show, October 8th, Week 18, the Sunday night game, the final game of the NFL regular season, Steelers hosting the Ravens.
That's it.
For first place in the AFC.
That's it. And for this all to check out, the Ravens have to get hot. They'll beat the Steelers at home 4 weeks earlier, so then it comes down to a tiebreaker. Steelers will have a 1-game lead going into that game, and then the Ravens will break their heart. And one more thing I'll throw out there, Connor Orr, my Heed the Call colleague and senior writer at Sports Illustrated, threw out something I loved. As long as Lamar's out, let's just put Derrick Henry at like Wildcat, have him play quarterback, find a way to ugly it up and win with that guy, and then when Lamar gets back, away we go.
Yeah, I agree with you. Ravens are the team. Maybe not the most fun pick. We don't even find the pick like a really out of nowhere team, but the Ravens are the actual logical pick here from the 1-4 teams. And I think they can do it. I just think they have to get healthier, and they have to just hold the fort down and have Lamar back for the second half of the season.
Which is a boring answer because there's nothing Cinderella about that story, but it's hard to really make a case for any of these other teams.
You know what? We had fun along the way.
We did.
To the ball. We had fun along the way to the ball. People have fun each and every week on your show.
Yes.
Listening, watching the show. Where can people have fun with you, Dan?
The Heed the Call NFL podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts. And also, yes, we have our own YouTube channel like you, Bill. So wherever you like to listen, you like to watch, go for it. And we're happy to have you.
Dan, thank you so much.
Thanks, Bill.